Bob, for part two, what was the most difficult besides not having way too many interviews? What was another difficult moment of putting all this together for you?
This one in particular, or all the titles?
Yes, this one in particular.
Well, getting, that was one of the main reasons I actually moved up here. I was living in Sacramento at the time, driving back and forth. And my another associate producer who also did a lot of the camera work, Alex, he lives in San Jose. And so I moved in with him, which I'm still living now. And because I figured, I'm coming up here all the time. Danny and all the reality check TV guys there in the Bay Area, there in San Francisco. Matt is in, San Lorenzo. I was, doing the podcast with him. And so I was coming up here all the time. So when he offered me, to move here, I took it on. And so it worked out really well. So the toughest part was really getting everything together and getting all the interviews lined up. John Stranansky lives in Dallas now. He flew in like 2 or 3 times. We set up interviews when he was down. Like I said, Danny set up a lot of interviews on his own with his little camcorder. And so that I think that was kind of the toughest part, is kind of getting everything together. But I tell you, this one was easier in the sense that having Danny involved in the editing, with all the other Inside Metal LA titles, I had to go through the process of, I basically go through all the quotes and I write down the quotes to use in the sections, via the time codes. And I said, this one fits here, this one fits here. And then I usually have to puzzle it together. Carl and I, in the past, would puzzle everything together. I gave Danny all the quotes and stuff. And he said, let me go do a run through, a rough, because he kind of like puts a temporary or just kind of a preliminary thing together. I gave him like the chapters, because we all have the chapters pretty similar to all the Inside Metal titles. They start from the beginnings to the, the club scene to blah, 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 blah. And I gave him kind of the toast. He put it together and it was like almost perfect. For our first run, it was like, holy shit. And everything flowed so good. So that came out. It was just such a great thing having Danny Shipman involved, because he knew, he's been involved in editing all the reality check TV stuff for years. He knew the flow. He obviously knew all the bands. He is, so once we got that together, there was only very little. We just had to kind of shuffle around and make, kind of even out some of the chapters and whatnot. But, the initial thing that he put together, before we, it was always, myself or Carl and myself had to go through each one and here, go to the editor, place this here, put this, and shit, but this one, boom. So I would say this one was easier in that sense. But, the thing that became, I guess, the most difficult thing, the process here was the master editing. For the reason I'll tell everyone, because everyone's going, dude, what's with the delay? Part 2 was supposed to be out last month in March, as you know. We had an issue with the audio. And, when you deal with, we have ours on, Amazon Prime and Apple Movies, iTunes, whatever, Apple TV, whatever they call it now, Apple Music, Apple Movies, Google Play, Vudu, all these things, particularly Apple and Amazon Prime, they have a QC policy, quality control. They go through everything. And we had some of the audio was, for some reason, part 1 was fine. For part 2, when Hugh did the editing, for some reason, it was mono. Some of the channels were on mono. So, and they checked it like last minute, over at MVD, took it over for the QC for the streaming, and it got kicked back. And we figured out it was like done in mono. Hugh was already in New York. So it was just the biggest hassle was we had to contact him. He goes, dude, it's all on my hard drive in the Bay Area, locked in storage in my vault in my storage. So Danny and I had to go there and we had to figure it out. I had to ship through there. I had to go through the hard drive. So we had to get through that process. So anyway, that's why part 2 has been delayed. We're hoping it'll come out in May. We don't have a confirmed release date yet because they're still QC and everything. And until they have it all QC'd and everything okayed, which should be any day now, then they could set the release date.